And we are now recording, which is a good start. Share computer sound. Well, ladies and gentlemen, and fans of Salvation Army music, we have indeed a legend with us today. The legend that is Jim Curnow, talking to us live in this recorded interview. Jim, it is indeed an honour from the wilds of Suffolk in England to speak to such an esteemed member of the Salvation Army music fraternity.
Yes.
And just trying to narrow down the music that has come from your pen is almost impossible. And just to be able to talk to you and chat to you, well, let's see how it goes. You're probably the first all-American composer, apart from Joel, that I've written that has an extensive library behind you. So I'm kind of interested in, you know, when you were growing up in the Salvation Army, who were your musical heroes? Who were the people that were big in Salvation Army music when you were a lad, when you were growing up?
Yeah, I'm very fortunate to grow up in eastern Michigan, around Detroit area. And we had a lot of music in our home. My mother and father were both musical. My mother more so. She was a core pianist.
Mm-hmm.
And then my two brothers, both terrific tuba players, or bass players, as we say in the Army. So we had music around the house all the time, not only Army music, but classical music. I can remember my dad almost every Sunday waking us up with some Salvation Army march or something. Yeah.
That's an interesting.
But it was great fun, you know, and so we were always making music of some sort. And then a big influence at the Salvation Army Corps in Royal Oak, Michigan, where I grew up, with a tremendous bandmaster, and a lot of influences there from various people, both spiritually and musically. Max Wood was my bandmaster and gave us private lessons when we were kids, and then would look at our music as we wrote it, and even make us play it with the band, or give us a chance to play it with the band, so we'd get that opportunity. And I remember the first piece I ever wrote, I took it down for band practice. He said, "Okay, we'll do it tonight." So I took it down, and he said, "Okay, now you're going to conduct it," which was a huge surprise, because I wasn't
even sit back and
anticipating
play
that.
it. You had to conduct it.
Yeah, it was great.
So
I was nervous, I guess. Yeah, and then he would sit out in the audience and write a critique on the conducting and the music. Yeah, he was a school teacher, really great musician. And then I had opportunity to go up in a really great school band program. So I had, I guess, the advantage of both aspect of school band music and brass band music, choir music. So I had, you know, a lot of opportunities, which are really terrific.
I mean, because of your extensive career, I mean, computer technology didn't exist in those days, did it? So you were, I would guess you were definitely a pen and paper man when you started out in your school band.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't catch all that.
When you started out, was it literally a pen and paper job? You know, manuscript paper and jotting down the ideas?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, just being in those ensembles all the time, I just had this real desire to try to write something for them to play. And basically, I could hear it all in my head, but I couldn't play. I don't play piano, so it wasn't really possible to play it on the piano. That does
surprise me.
Yeah.
That does surprise me.
Yeah, no piano skills. So I would write it down and then score it out. I did a lot of that at school. We had a brass sextet. I wanted to
Mm.
have some people to read my music. You know, 6 parts were a lot better than trying to copy out 35 or whatever.
Oh,
So
yes.
I I wrote a lot of things for a brass sextet I had, and then I, of course, with 6 people instead of 5 quintet, I got to play euphonium, so I get to play my own parts, and that was a great experience because I kind of see what I was doing, but really didn't have a lot of names for it. And then when I got to university, I just started peeling off little tags of, oh yeah, I know what that is. That's counterpoint. I've been doing that, but I didn't know what it was called. That's a ninth chord. I didn't know what that was called either, but I know now. I know. So,
Yeah,
you know, a
learn.
continual learning process.
So it must have been a really interesting experience. I mean, obviously, you start from pen and paper, you sketch it out, and you've got all these ensembles and musical groups that you have a chance to develop with. Um, so when you started sort of being able to write seriously and thought, hang on, you know, I can do this professionally. I can do this as, you know, the postman delivers the mail, the doctor does the medical. You know, it's not just fooling around with the school band.
Hmm.
Well, I looked up your index, and the first one I can trace is Guardian of Our Way in 1975. Obviously, you've been writing for a lot longer than that. So, when you know, you obviously have a long credential where the memory is very strong, where you have memories of school band and Salvation Army bands playing the bits and pieces. I mean, I remember, I think it was "Oh How I Love You" was one we had on the stands, and I thought, well, where does that come from? And I had to ask you, and it was you wrote it for your YP band years ago.
Hmm.
So it's very interesting to see. Who are your composing when you were doing this, when you were developing it in a serious format, and you were thinking, oh, you know, the divisional band, the territorial bands, and maybe even the staff band could play a James Curnow piece in a Salvation Army meeting. Who were the inspirational mentors that helped you along that process?
Who are my mentors?
Yes.
Um, well, of course, all the Salvation Army composers that we played all the time when I was a kid, youth band, and then, of course, the Royal Oak, Michigan Senior Band, which was a very fine program, still is.
Mm.
Um, get to hear all those wonderful composers and kind of learn from them scoring for brass band, which is such a different animal than scoring for, say, concert band or wind band.
Yeah.
And so uh, I think that's probably where I first learned to understand brass band scoring and to just love doing it. And again, we'd get a chance to hear our pieces. We'd write them, and you know, who doesn't want to hear their piece when it's written? You know,
Yeah.
I had composition teachers in college that said, "Oh, I don't care if they ever play my music. I'm just going to write it." And I thought to myself, "Nah, you know, you want to hear that piece very badly, you know." So we got to hear them, and in college, my college band director, who I had worked with, even in middle school, um, he would come in as our special guest and work the band and get the band going, so we could go to festivals and get a great comments and a grade one on the in the competition. And then he was my college band director also, so he was a mentor from way back. When I got to college, he wanted me to write for the marching band and for the college band, university band, and I said to him, "Well, if I don't have to march in marching band, I'll write all your music for the marching band." You know, so I got to
Oh,
sit down in the basement of the band building and not have to march. So that was, and then that gave me many more opportunities there to write for concert band too, which I suppose that was my first start.
interesting. I, I mean, I don't dwell too much in the non-army stuff because the focus is different. But you had this you had this incredible career of composition, writing for the school bands, the college bands, and so forth. But within the Salvation Army context, you're expected to include a hymn tune, and that melody has to go in. With concert bands and outside music, you don't have that kind of necessity. So as a composer, is it more difficult to write for a Salvation Army band where a melody has to be inputted, whereas in a concert band, you don't? Is there a difficulty?
Well, it's a different animal, of course. With the Salvation Army music, there has to be a tune in it,
Mhm.
which I support 100%. I think that's the way it should be. And we are trying, obviously, to have a ministry and create a piece of music that will have a ministry in it. I've always tried, when possible, to work original writing into music that's not original. And in other words, a hymn tune or whatever it is where I'm using in the music. And sometimes you hear a piece of music and there's a lot of original music, then the original music, which is great, stops, and then there's a tune. And then after the tune, we go back to the original music again. So I try to incorporate it. I don't know if I've been successful, but
I think you have, yes.
I try to incorporate the song into the texture of the piece, the overall composition of the piece.
Yeah. I was, I mean, I was being a key worker, I was in an empty office today, which gave me the opportunity to have my radio on. And bearing in mind that I needed to do some prep, I had the Great Salvation War came up, which is immediately Curnow. But I look at the end, Stand Like the Brave, and then that wonderful "In Thee, O Lord, do I put my trust," before "Rescue the Perishing." But it's bolted together very effectively, because it is a great salvation war. I mean, it lives up to the title, but the harmonics are not kind of, you've got this kind of war Zulu feel where everyone's kind of, we're battling, and coming from the American composition, the American military style, and that kind of marching. So it's a very prevalent and forward thinking, but it hangs together very well. I've never played it. I've listened to it a lot of times. But, you start out with that wonderful "Stand Like the Brave," and then that wonderful segue into "In Thee, O Lord, do I put my trust." And we've got to rescue the perishing.
Right.
It's like just a musical journey of hymn tunes. So, it's a wonderful journey. So it must be something that you enjoy, the musical journey.
Try to tell a story through that piece.
Yes.
I read some history. A friend of mine who's a Salvationist historian, I found an article in his book about the great. It was a war cry article, actually, from the late 1800s, and it was talking about this great Salvation War in which we were involved. And as soon as I saw that, I thought, "Oh, what a great title!" Now I got to find some music and a story to tell, a ministry to tell through the music. And I had picked "In Thee, O Lord, do I put my trust" for the middle section. I knew that ahead of time, because without that, as Salvationists, what do we have? We have music, but if we don't have trust in the Lord and our security on the Lord through those thoughts in that song, then we could just as well be writing an outside piece for an outside band. But I wanted to have a ministry and a story. And before I ever started writing music, really, I had all three tunes and songs collected together, and I wanted to interweave those thoughts all the way through from beginning to end. So we're rescuing the perishing. What's the first tune in there?
"Stand Like the Brave" on my index.
Yeah, "Stand Like the Brave." And of course, in the war cry article, they were talking about, I think it was San Francisco, the soldiers being stoned and beat up and thrown in jail. And I thought, "Stand Like the Brave." It's got to be in there somewhere. So and I started with that, and then trying to consecrate ourselves with "In Thee, O Lord, do I put my trust," and then going on the mission that God has created us to do, to rescue the perishing. So that's kind of how it all came about.
Yeah, very interesting, because this is what I have really benefited from talking to the composers. It allows me to go back and say, I now know the story behind the piece, because sometimes you get the music put on the stands and it's kind of, oh, it's based on this chorus. Well, why did the composer use that chorus, and where did that come from? I mean, "Faith is the Victory" is obviously a very well-known, probably one of your most well-known works, because it's just a very eclectic piece. But I think I got "Peace Like a River" come up. Lovely hymn tune arrangement, but it's kind of the opposite end of the Great Salvation War, because it's got that jolliness in it, hasn't it? You've got Peace Like a River, and it's got that solid tune behind it, hasn't it?
It's not in my Great Salvation War.
No, it's a different piece, isn't it? It's a separate piece of music that came up.
Oh, the other one that I wrote on Peace Like a River.
Yeah, because
Yeah, it's kind of a little it's kind of a little Dixieland thing that I put together.
I couldn't think of the
Yeah.
term.
Yeah. I don't know. The tune is such a great tune, and I just felt I just felt it in a light mood. I couldn't get serious about it. But in life, if you have Christ in your life, you have peace like a river. So
Yeah.
I wanted to keep it kind of on the light side, joyous side, celebration side. And first thing came to mind is let's do it like a little Dixieland thing. So it's been used a lot by bands on tours, where after the intermission, in order to get people back in their seats,
I can imagine that.
They start playing that to get them going, and I'm glad it's used.
But yeah, I mean, I'm looking at, you have one of these CVs where some of the younger composers who are just starting out on their musical journey, they do the quick, snappy festival arrangements. They do a suite of maybe 2 or 3 songs in a very short space of time that they're writing for their youth bands, they're writing for the local YP bands. And I was really struck. I thought, you've written so many different genres that how do you kind of have a conversation? And I remember years ago when I got my first earphones, I didn't have to have the CD player on at full blast on a Sunday morning. And the 2 ones that came up, Laude, Laude, which is a wonderful symphony in sound I enjoy as a piece, and also psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs.
Oh, yes.
It's just a bullet point thing, but it's just that wonderful relaxed journey, and you kind of, I know that song, and
right.
It's kind of informal and relaxed. But Lord stands out, or Laude, however you wish to pronounce it, as Laude, as a sort of, it's almost Kenneth Downey in a variation format. What's the story behind Laude? Can you remember at all?
Say that again. What's the last part?
The story behind Laude. What caused it to wrote?
Yeah, our speakers here on this laptop aren't working the best, so it's a little hard to hear. But
I'll try my best.
Yeah, Laude was a commission by the New York Staff Band many years ago. And for me at least, when I'm writing for a group like that, or any staff band, well, any band, but particularly a staff band, you want something that will challenge them. That will, for me, it always has to have a message. If there's not a message, it's not worth the time. But something that will challenge them. And they had asked me for, let me think now, a rhapsodic set of variations on a tune that I liked. So I thought, rhapsodic, okay, well, that's not too hard to understand. I can do that. And so I began with selecting intervals from the tune itself and using those intervals to create a new melody, and then another new melody and another new melody. So the 3 melodies that I created carry each variation. And then the hymn itself, I think the tune itself, if I recall, comes in near the end. But it was just this idea of why not create a set of variations that would show the tunes, the beautiful lyricism of the tune, and then show it in different spirits and different types. I don't remember the exact story behind the piece anymore, but at the time, I think I had a different text set up to go with the music of each section.
Yeah, it's very interesting because one of the questions that when we set out on this journey of interviewing, I asked for, many of the questions that I gave you were questions that were given to me. And one of the most popular ones I find is combined with the originality. It's, you'll get a commission for a piece of work, whether it's a hymn tune arrangement or a solo, based on a well-known tune or the composers, the soloist tune in memory of their grandfather or a family member. And is, Jim, can you do a cornet solo based on Repton or something? How do you approach that, knowing how many other solos of Repton, and how do you make it Curnow specific?
Well, I think what I would try to do, first of all, is analyze the text and try to do something specifically to enhance the text through music.
Mm-hmm.
And try to keep it in the context of that beautiful tune at the same time, because sometimes I hear variations on tunes and I wonder to myself, now, why did they pick that tune? Because it's a tune that really doesn't call for variations, but it's such a lovely melody.
Mm-hmm.
I would spend a lot of time just singing it, reviewing it over and over and over again in my mind before I started to do a set of variations. And then I would want to highlight the text so that the text has a story, the text has meaning, and I can project a message through that text and the tune.
Interesting.
And it depends who asked me to write it too, how difficult I might make it.
Yes.
You know,
obviously you've got the
if I make it for a normal core band, which they're fine core bands, I'm not knocking that.
No, not at all.
But if I were going to do it for a regular size core band, it might not be as difficult as it would be for a staff band or an international staff band, as far as that goes. So all those things are taking into consideration.
Yeah.
My Psalm of Praise was written for a very fine core band in Chicago, Illinois. It's now called Norwich Citadel.
Yes. Yep.
But at that time, it was a Montclair core band in Chicago.
Yep.
And they were going on a trip tour
to
England.
Chicago. I've actually been to Chicago, so
Sorry?
I've actually been to Chicago once, many years ago, with my family.
Oh yeah.
So, Bill Holmes was the corps sergeant major.
Yep.
And
it's a great town.
Yeah, it's a very interesting town. Particularly if you come from England, it's very unusual. So I remember meeting Bill was an absolute delight. But it's very interesting because it's really hard to pick music. One question I'd like to ask you specifically, and outside of the compositions that you get commissions, I'll get the word right, that you get asked for, when you're sitting at home or you're out with the family and a tune comes to your brain, you think, hey, that can make a... How do you go about that? Because you've got to control yourself to say you can blow it up for the New York Staff Band or for a Congress, or you can combat it. How do you maintain your control on a new piece of original music based on a melody that you yourself have heard?
How do I keep control on it?
Yeah, I mean, you could blow it up to Carnegie Hall standards.
Yeah.
Sometimes God is saying, okay, I want this tune, and you just do an arrangement or a selection. How do you keep sort of that sensible parameters on the composition so you don't just blow it out to the extreme? Because
for me, it generally depends on what the people are asking for it or commissioning it are looking what kind of a situation they're going to use it in. With my Psalm of Praise, knowing that they were going on a trip to England, they wanted to showcase their band and sound good, and play music that hadn't been heard before. And that's a good idea, because sometimes you go to concerts on a tour and you see people in the back row with their scores, listening to the music, following along with the score, which is kind of nerve-wracking. So when you take a piece that's brand new and no one knows it, then you have a kind of an edge. And so that's kind of what they wanted, some new pieces. I wasn't the only composer that they commissioned a piece with, but I tried to make it a challenge for them, but yet keep it within the parameters of that melody, which for me is a tremendous melody of praise. Praise my soul, the King of Glory.
Yeah.
Wow, what a great hymn, what a
Yeah.
great text.
Yeah.
And so on that one, thinking that people would know the melody. Now that's not necessarily true anymore. It's kind of
No,
changed.
yeah, I've come across that many times.
But back then, everybody knew that melody, and so I created all new material at the beginning of my own design, uh, and waited for the tune to come in at the end because there were so many references to it
Hmm.
all the way through, but the tune never appeared until the very last, I don't know, maybe 2 minutes, 3 minutes in the piece. So that the entire variation set of variations was aimed toward that goal. So I just
Yeah.
kept building and building and building.
Yeah.
And I oh how I love Jesus. I don't know if you know that little tune.
Yeah,
Uh,
we played it in a core band not too while ago, and I was mystified because the chorus, I think, comes from "There Is a Name I Love to Hear," but it's been separated from the
mm,
song in the songbook. And I remember
mm,
writing to you saying, where did you get the chorus? Because in the songbook, the chorus isn't linked to the song. Whereas if you go on to, the database of church hymns, it's a very natural setting for it.
right. That little arrangement actually, I was looking through the songbook and looking for songs. There were a lot of songs about um, Jesus' love for us,
Hmm.
but I couldn't find many, and I don't know, there may be more now, but at the time, I couldn't find many that spoke about my love for Jesus. I was teaching at the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana, Illinois. Oddly enough, the corps was called the Champaign Corps, which
Lovely name.
for a bunch of teetotalers, it's kind of interesting. But anyway, I was teaching there, and we went to the corps there, and it was a relatively medium-sized corps, I guess. But we only had a small band, and many times on weekends people were gone. So I tried to create a piece of music that could be played with, say, 4 or 6 people, and it was flexible scoring. And
Yeah.
so I put that little piece together, and I wanted to start it out with almost like a testimony meeting where the cornets start off with "Oh, how I love Jesus," and then the second cornets come in and go along with that. And then the next verse, I believe, if I call it right, is horns, baritones get a chance to say, "Oh, how I love Jesus."
Yeah.
And then the final, everybody comes in and says, "Oh, how I love Jesus." And so I put that little piece together, and it's amazing how much play that gets. It's
Yeah.
played all the time because it's simplistic, but I hope meaningful at the same time,
Yeah.
that it's not just a piece of music.
Yeah. I mean, it's always interesting because growing up in the UK, I remember having a conversation with a composer and saying, I found this little chorus that was completely alien. Was it a good old fashioned American Sunday school chorus from the days of summer camps? And he said, Morven, you're too young, boy. He said, some of these, he said, that cross it, if you'd have been brought up in the 1950s with the Eric Balls and the Leslie Condons and the
Yeah,
Ray Stem Allens, you would have known that. That would have been marching down with the band. But one of the tunes that I came across thanks to one of your pieces was Saints of God, that was completely new to me until I had to go and Saints of God, where does that come from? And lovely little festival arrangement of yours, 1978 published. What's the story behind? Was it just something you felt like doing? Saints of God?
what's the tune again?
It's labeled as Saints of God, a festival arrangement.
Oh, Faith is the Victory.
No, Saints of God.
What? Face of God.
Saints.
Oh, Saints of God.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry.
Okay. That's
This
okay.
little tiny speaker on this thing. Really, I'm not deaf. It's just not working well.
I'll do that and
Oh, there we go.
look like I've got a moth in my brain.
Anyway, yeah, Saints of God. That was. Let me think. Who did I write that for? That was a request. Might have been New York Staff Band. I just can't recall. but again, it was one of those choruses which had a terrific message in it, but it had a lot of energy.
Yeah.
And they asked for an opener that they could
Another
use.
opener.
Yeah, begin a concert or the
Yeah.
second half of a concert
Yeah.
or a closer, short and energetic, that would have a lot of drive and energy to it. And that
Yeah.
tune is just what I picked. So,
Yeah. It's interesting because it was one of them songs where I'd never heard of it before because it just wasn't used in my local corps. And yet
mm-hmm,
it's just right. The tune is right at the center of the piece
right.
and kind of harmonic and lovely. And I mean, I think Sunday morning I had variations on Terra Beta come up. Now, it's not particularly a tune that I would have thought that most people would have picked because it's a bit kind of anonymous, Terra Beta. But yet you produce a lovely variational sort of tone poem kind of thing on that.
Almost. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of times I just sit down and go through the songbook and I look at the text first. I don't really
Mm.
pay much attention to the melody until after I've decided, yeah, I really like that text. And then I'll check out the melody. If the melody is something that I think is, it's really going to work. And at the time, of course, I wrote that probably back in the 60s, I suppose. I'd have to look at the copyright on
1991 it
that.
was
I don't.
published.
Hmm?
It's got a publishing date of 1991.
91.
Yeah, it's got
Really?
festival series 1991.
Oh, okay. Well, that surprises me. How time flies.
Absolutely.
Anyway, I usually look at the text and then I look at the melody, and if I like the melody, then I'll go with it. If there are alternative melodies that I think people will know, and of course, I think it's a Salvation Army tune. I don't think it's known outside the Army.
Yeah, I've
Uh,
had to look that one up.
I would have to look that up.
Yeah,
Um, but I wanted something that would be familiar to Salvationists and again would have lots of energy and get a concert started.
yeah.
It's
Yeah,
not easy. It takes quite a bit of work to get it worked
yeah.
up.
I mean, as a composer and arranger through the years, I mean, I've come across this problem many times. Uh, do you ever get faced with a commission from a overseas Salvation Army band, whether it's a core band, and they say we would like that tune, but they associate it with completely different words to what you associate it with?
Mm. So where they have certain words that they want to use.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes,
I
yes, I
think of
have.
Aurelia, and I was speaking to a friend of mine in the local Catholic church who loves Aurelia, but the idea of singing "Oh Jesus, I have promised" to it, he's
Mm,
completely never done it. And she said,
right.
well, it goes. And I was speaking to my good friend Nicholas Samuel in Canada, who's obviously a British officer now serving in Canada, who's a wonderful composer. He said, you very often get tunes that are well known, but the words are completely alien. And you're like,
Right.
I never would have associated those words with that tune. But have you ever been, where you've had a commission from overseas? We want a James Curnow piece based on this tune, but we associate, and you're like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
you've got to go
Well,
back and look
that's
at the words
happened too
afresh.
with writing a piece based on a set of words that I'm familiar with here in the USA. And when the tune gets over there, it's not known. The tune is known, but the text is
Yeah,
totally different. So when they hear the setting, again, it comes up a little bit strange because they're thinking totally different words.
yeah.
So I think of arrangement I did of He Giveth More Grace, which is one of my favorite all-time tunes.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and over there, I think you use Black Lions
Yes, the
as
Stedman
the
Allen
tune.
version.
Yeah, and over here we use He Giveth More Grace. Well, actually, to tell you the truth, I studied that, and the tune that we think of as American is really a British tune that was started over there and then came over here, but it's no longer used in Great Britain
There's two
as the
tunes for that, isn't
tune.
there? I think
Hmm?
there's one tune, Blacklands, which Ray Stedman Allen wrote.
Yes,
He giveth more grace, and then you've got
right.
He giveth more grace as Arbor, which
Yes,
I think is the
yes.
Ash
That's
Grove.
the Hardy Norseman or something like that.
Yeah,
But
Ash
the
Grove,
tune
I
we
think.
use, He giveth more grace when my burdens go greater.
Oh, that's a new one on
Wonderful
me.
tune. And I
Yep,
think
new
it's a
one.
church tune from England that came over here and now is the tune that's acquainted with that or accompanied with that set of words.
Yeah.
But I wrote that and sent it over, and they said, well, we don't use this tune. So Bill Himes published it in Chicago in the festival series, and I've gotten a lot of use since then. But it was based on the tune that we sing here, which is, I think, is a lovely tune. It's a tune that my wife keeps telling me she wants sung at her funeral, but I keep telling her I'm going first. So I'm not going to be left behind to clean out this house. So
I had that conversation because many years ago I got email contact with a gentleman called Bob Getz, and it was coming up to Mothering Sunday, and I was desperate to find something for my mother. And he said, "What's her favourite tune?" I said, "Whitechapel," and I said, or known in the US as "Death Is Coming." Da 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 da. And he wrote a little a quintet that he said, and sent it with my love, and that's your Mother's Day present from me.
Yeah.
And ever since then, every time we play Whitechapel, God Who Touches Earth with Beauty, we have to say, it's called Death Is Coming, and Mum wants it at her funeral, but I don't want it that soon.
Oh no. I've never heard any pieces based on Death Is Coming. I think the Salvation Army uses that for funerals.
Oh, Music of Thanksgiving by Kenneth Downey.
Really?
Yeah.
It's in there.
It's about a 15-minute epic.
Okay. I don't know it.
Yeah, we had Plymouth Band come up and do a concert, and their big finale to the first half was they just played Divine Communion, which is one of my mum's favourites.
Oh, yes.
And then she loves the tune of Whitechapel, which is Music of Thanksgiving. So when the band started up, and whoa, God Who Touches Earth with Beauty, and it's a 15-minute epic.
Yeah,
it's one of my mum's favourites. But I'll send you the link.
I based my thoughts around Guardian of Our Way. I don't know if you know that piece.
Yeah, I know of it. Yeah. I haven't heard it for a while, but
along the same idea as not quite the tune you just mentioned.
Which one? Whitechapel? Death Is Coming?
No, there's another one. Not Quiet Pastures, but
it could be anything.
Anyway,
yeah,
I based it loosely on that older tune because it had good thoughts for any occasion for salvation service or a morning service as well, a holiness meeting.
Yeah. Was that I have a very good lecture playing a piece of yours, and I think it was based on an old songster piece by Terry Camsey or something. I could be misthinking, but one thing that I was reminded of was your connection with Asbury College.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
You want to know about Asbury College?
Yeah, yes, please.
Yeah.
I know a little bit about it, but
yeah, it's a university.
Yeah.
In fact, they've changed the name from college to university because in a lot of other countries, college means high school or something like that. So they wanted to have a little more recognition worldwide. But it's an institution that it's a Christian institution, interdenominational. My wife and I went there for a year. Well, not even a year, half a year. Not because it wasn't a good school. It's a great school. Academically, you have to be very strong to get into it and stay there. But at that point, the music department wasn't developed to what I felt I needed to have in my education. But that's my spiritual home because that's where I met the Lord there at Asbury University. It's in Kentucky. It has a great Salvation Army student fellowship.
Yeah,
and when I came back as on the faculty many years later, we started the Salvation Army Student Fellowship growing. It had already been there, but it was kind of hit and miss depending on how many students they had, and they always had a band and a cymbal brigade and some other things. But it just seemed to grow when I got there, and some other people who were there at the same time. And we ended up at one time with over 100 Salvationists there, um, who were just studying academically in their particular field, but also wanted to be part of the Salvation Army Fellowship. And we had
Yeah.
Sunday meetings every Sunday, Sunday evening. And Sunday mornings, the students would go to the local corps, whatever corps it was, and participate in the services, take their instruments and play or
Hmm.
sing. Or so, and it's still growing strong. Going strong. It's grown again. We lost a few over the years to other universities, but it's coming strong again and doing very well. So I'm glad to see that happen.
Yeah. I think you had a composers symposium there a few
Yes,
years ago,
yes.
and
They had, I think, two or three. I was part of a couple of them.
yeah.
Hmm.
So very interesting for a friend of mine who's in the Canadian Staff Songsters to be able to come and sort of see all these people and sort of pick your brains and have this mutual learning
Yes,
facility where you can just sit down and there's no pressure.
it's a great
And
event.
yeah, is that where I might get this wrong? So is that where the Asperian March was written
Yes,
for?
that's right. That I have not heard that played too much. It's actually a very interesting march. Um, I think I used "Rescue the Perishing" in there.
Yeah, it sounds familiar.
Yeah, and the the band was very active in ministry in the area around Kentucky, and even up into Ohio, and so we were playing a lot um, around that area. So I wanted a piece that would have, I wanted a march for the band, kind of a signature
Hmm.
march.
Yeah.
So that's where it
You
came
wanted your
from.
own Rose Hill, didn't you?
Sorry?
You wanted your own Rose Hill, didn't you?
That's right,
Yeah.
exactly. Yes. And so it's based on that. I have problems with writing marches in that they quite often turn out to be major works rather than just a simple march. Don't, I don't know why. That's like my Faith is the Victory. It turned out to be a kind of a full blown
Mm,
march. I wish I could simplify things and write just a standard march like James Anderson's marches. He's wrote great marches. Just I
yeah.
love his marches, and Bram Coles and some of the others. Bill Himes writes great marches,
Hmm.
but that's how the march came about, and I wanted to have it in there because church people would recognize the tune
Yeah.
and the words. My goal as a SA bandmaster and a composer was always to try to have an outreach, to the ministry
Yeah.
when you're wherever you're ministering. And at the time I used to find that a lot of bands would go to a church and play Gowans and Larsons, and it's great music.
Lovely.
You
Oh,
know, it's
lovely.
great music, but the church in general knows nothing about it, so they wouldn't
Yeah.
have a relationship to the words and the music. Um, or they'd play marches with old army tunes, old
Yeah.
army words. Now that's great because now we're using screens so they can put up the text for the pieces,
Yeah.
and,
I
and
was
it
going
has a
to
little
ask
more
you.
ministry.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I,
I'm
as
always
some.
concerned.
Yeah.
I've always been concerned for ministry, and if we're not going to have a ministry with our musical organizations, then I don't know really why we exist.
Yeah. Is that something that you've seen over the years in your compositional output? That you start from a place where they would literally turn up, sit down, and listen to the band. So now it's almost a kind of slideshow in itself where we're playing, I don't know, pastoral, or we're playing emblems, and
Mm.
as soon as the relevant verse or text it's on the screen. So obviously you go from nothing to having this full-blown explanation of the piece with all the text labeled. have you
I think
have you
that's
noticed that in your career?
I think that's extremely important, and I support that idea. Emblems is strictly a Salvation Army piece
Hmm.
because I wrote it using all Salvation Army tunes.
Hmm.
Again, trying to create energy and spirit for the Salvation Army, and I think it's done what I set out to make it do. But I think with a piece like that, the use of text on a screen so people can see it
Yeah.
and understand what the tunes are and what the tunes are saying is a huge benefit in ministry. I mean, the outside church has really learned how to do that with all the the videos that they put out with the songs
Hmm.
and videos of with the text up there so we can sing along. I think that's been a great advantage that, and we need to do more of it. And I'm glad to see the Army doing some now.
Yeah, it's very, sometimes it's very interesting because I was speaking to Barry Gott and saying, you get a composer like yourself who is well versed in all forms of music.
Mm.
And have you ever had the experience of, the band says, we'd like you to write this for this tune, and people go, how the heck did you? I never would have thought of putting that music in that genre and sort of
Mm.
taking it out of the home and putting it into something completely different. Do you enjoy that musical challenge still?
You talking about the more popular type music, or?
Well, yeah, I mean, I can't think what the piece of music was, but it was a very old classic. It was like How Great Thou Art.
Mm.
And it was Nick Simmons Smith, and he set a swing to it and called it
Oh
"Then
yeah.
Sings My Soul." Have you ever had that where you've taken a very well known classic majestic church tune and twisted it, and people have been sort of taken aback by your original treatment of it because they never would have thought of doing that?
I don't find anything wrong with it. I think the success has to be based on quality arrangements, so that the music is treated in a way that it's respected,
Hmm.
but at the same time, the tune can be heard. I think a lot of things I hear coming out these days, there's so much going on in the music that it's difficult to hear the melodic line, and it's difficult to relate the text to the melodic line because you can't hear it. So I would encourage the younger writers coming up, though you want to show your abilities and your gymnastics, if you will,
Yeah,
in writing, which is fun. Got to show your skills and the kinds of things you can do. Try in every way that you can that the the melody is always heard above everything else. And of course, that comes down to the bandmasters balancing the ensemble too.
hmm,
A writer can only write for what he's hearing in his head, or she is hearing in her head,
hmm,
and scoring it that way. But scoring it so that the melodic line is always most important is really important. That
yeah,
we don't have so much filigree going on that you can't really hear the tune.
yeah. I do you take advantage of modern computer techniques when you're writing now? For Sibelius or Finale, do you use that kind of music notation software on your pieces now?
No, I don't. I
Oh,
don't.
I did wonder.
Yeah, I haven't gotten into it. Now I kind of wish I had, because all the publishers now are requiring um, manuscripts done on Finale or Sibelius when
Yeah.
you send it in. But I've never had to. All my commissions, outside the Army, have always paid for the engraving. So I get a professional engraver to do
Yeah.
it, and it's beautiful when it comes out. Hopefully error free.
Yeah.
And if not, they'll fix it. So that's always been paid for by someone else, and I've never had to pay for that
Hmm.
out of pocket. With the Army, particularly here in the States, generally I'll send them a score and they'll have it typeset, as we call it, or engraved
Yep.
electronically. So I haven't had to do that either. But now with outside publishers, that's changed. And so now I find myself having to pay to get someone to engrave it. If it's on a commission, that's not a problem because I build the engraving into the commission.
Yeah.
Say a $15,000 commission, I usually build a couple thousand into it to pay the engraving part. So, but with the Army, if it's for a territorial band, staff band, they'll pay to have it engraved, or they've got somebody in house that can engrave it.
Yeah.
So that's not a problem.
Oh, that's interesting. Um, I've had some composers they get emails and phone calls and letters from all corners of the world, and Salvation Army bands of all shapes and sizes. We played this. We played this. I've been told South Korean bands, Romanian bands. Is there any sort of memory that stands out for you of and the most unusual place you've heard of your music being played, or you've had a message sent? We played this James Curnow piece last Sunday.
Yeah, I that's interesting. I don't know if you remember General Rader and his wife Kay.
I knew of
Um,
them.
when
I
they
met
were
I met them a few years ago
in
at Boundless.
sorry.
I met them at Boundless a few years ago.
Yes, yes, yes. Wonderful couple. They're we were soldiering when we lived in Kentucky. We were soldiering at the Lexington, Kentucky Corps, and they were soldiers there, so we get to see them all the time. Wonderful people. They take part in the Corps and do everything everybody else does. So it's terrific. But she was telling me one time they were in Africa someplace, little tiny village, and they went in with a group of Salvationists, and they were in this worship service, and as part of the service, she heard them start to sing "Worship the Lord in the Beauty of Holiness." I don't know if you know that
I know
little
it. Yeah.
prayer chorus.
Yeah.
Yes. And she said it was so hard. She said she just couldn't stop her emotions from flowing
Mm-hmm.
to know that she knows the guy that wrote that, and he goes to the same chorus she does. And here she was way out in Africa,
Mm-hmm.
and they were singing this chorus, and they sang it over and over and over again. So not only is it that's exciting to see an extension of my ministry. In other words, I write the piece and it has a ministry, and I don't have to be there every week for that ministry like I would at our core.
Yeah.
But that ministry goes on all around the world on days that I don't even know about. But it's really heart rendering when I find out how wonderful that is, that they are still using that song that far away. It's really wonderful.
Is there a piece of your music that is like the most quoted one that you get the memos about? Great Salvation War, Faith is the
Mm-hmm.
Victory. Is there a
Mm-hmm.
piece of music you're like, yeah, okay, that's out there, and that, it's kind of James Curnow, that's Saints of God. Is there a particular piece that you get a lot of feedback over?
Well, that's one of them. The other is my Psalm of Praise,
Yeah.
which gets a lot of play inside the Army and outside the Army
Mm-hmm.
because it's a church hymn.
Yeah.
Everybody knows it. Well, they used to know it, but that gets a lot of play. I get a lot of royalties through ASCAP, our American Society for Composers,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Authors, and Publishers. And it keeps me up to date on what Salvation Army music is being played because, believe it or not, we do get performance royalties on
Yep.
our pieces when they're played. And a lot of my little tunes that I've written for the American Instrumental Ensemble series,
Yep.
yeah, which they've been doing now for
Oh, good 40 years, I
over
think.
40 years, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all available online
it,
now.
it gets played all around the world
Yeah.
because it can be played in small core
Yeah.
with limited instrumentation. And all of those core, particularly in the socialist countries, have to pay royalties on what they play. So I see a lot of royalties for those coming through. Now the Army doesn't have to pay that, but usually it's a sponsor of some sort that will pay that fee.
Mm.
But it kind of keeps me up to date on what's being programmed where. So
Yeah. What was the last piece of Salvation Army music that you can remember sort of really moved you and touched you in a unique way that was unexpected?
yeah. Well, they all do because I always try to write a ministry into them. So it's I suppose the one that Guardian of Our Way is one that means a great deal to me. Also, I did a setting of Here at the Cross many years ago for the Flint Citadel Band in Michigan when I was the bandmaster, and we were getting ready for a trip to Canada, so I wrote the piece for that. But it became very much a very important piece for the Flint Citadel Band, and I sent it to England for publication. But Ray Stebbin Allen had already written his setting of that, so they said they couldn't use it. So I reset it for the New York series, And then a few years ago, Bill Himes came to me and said, you know, have you still got the original manuscripts for your original setting for full band? I said, yes, I do. He says, I want to publish that in the journal in
Yeah.
Chicago. So he published it. So it's now available. But that piece has become very, very meaningful to me. The depth of the meaning of the text has always applied greatly to me
Yeah.
as a person.
Am I right in thinking that you grew up with Bill Himes in the same? You soldiered for
Yeah,
some time.
well, his parents, his father, William Himes, was our corps officer in Royal Oak
Yeah.
when I was, well, let's see, he's 6 years younger. So I suppose might have been 10 when they came there.
Mm-hmm.
And he used to come to band practice and sit next to me in the euphonium section or sit close to me and listen to the band practice. And then later, when he started writing, we would read his materials as well. And Max Wood was a big influence in Bill's writing too, critiquing
Yeah.
and making positive suggestions. So we've been friends forever. And then we started an evangelistic group in the Central called the Second Destiny together. And
Oh, I've heard about that. The records are online.
yeah, we started that. It was just, I felt like the Lord had just given me that project and I needed
Yeah.
to do that. So I talked to the territorial music director at the time at the Central Music Institute near Chicago and mentioned it to him. And the next thing I knew, 2 days later, I was talking to the territorial commander saying, well, tell me about this project. you know. Bill and my brother Paul, who is a
Yeah.
wonderful bass player and electric bass player, and has played a lot of jazz and written some jazz and stuff. The three of us put all of it together in about I don't know 6 weeks, and we ended up during that summer in 10 weeks we had 250 engagements in 10 weeks.
That's the Lord. That's being taken seriously.
Oh, killed us. Oh, killed us. That was 25 a week, which is a lot when you're
Yeah.
thinking it's day after day after day.
Yeah.
And it was about a 16-piece group. But that was one of the things that came along that had a wonderful ministry. And then when I stopped working with it, Bill went on with it for a year, and then he changed the name to a smaller group, called it
Mm-hmm.
something else, and it went
Yeah.
on for a few years. But I don't believe it's going any longer.
No, I think
It was a great. It was a great ministry. We were right out in the public all the time.
Who are the other composers that, when you listen to their music, touches you? Other Salvation Army composers. When you hear the music on the stands or you're in the concert, and they bring real blessing. Are there any sort of names out there that you can think of that really kind of stick in your brain?
Oh yes, yeah. Eric Ball, first of all.
Yeah.
I've always loved his music. I think his music has been a big influence on me when I was studying his music and playing his music. There's a certain part of learning to be a composer is osmosis. You just kind of take it in from everybody else that's around you and everything that you're hearing all the time. And his Kingdom Triumphant, I'll never forget doing that with the Royal Oak Band as I was a euphonium player.
Mm-hmm.
And learning that, and the finale on that is so incredible that I'm sure that had a big influence on me. Ray Steven Allen's music I just love. I've always loved it. He had the ability to write simplistic. He could write incredibly involved, like Holy War.
Yes.
Just great music. Everything he wrote, I thought, was just great music. Of course, Les Condon, Ray Bose. I met all these people when I was a kid.
I've got to show this because it's one.
Oh, okay.
It's by his daughter Dot.
Oh, okay.
And that is just I think I was only about 3 or 4 when he passed away, so I never got the pleasure. But my core bandmaster grew up with him.
Oh yeah.
That sort of National School of Music and stuff. So we were constantly playing Les Condon music. So
yes.
Yeah, he's someone.
It's great music. It's great music with a great message. Why not play it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
you talk about simplicity. I remember Dot telling me that he was in the middle. I think it was like the Present Age or Easter Glory, and he was pounding on the piano and playing phrase after phrase. He'd take a break, come and eat tea, and the next thing you know, he's arranging a recorder trio for his three daughters
Yeah,
during tea time, and then he'd
right,
go back and finish off Easter Glory or whatever.
right. Yeah, that's kind of way it goes as a composer. You know, you finish one big item and somebody else says, you know, I'd like just a little march. So here you are working on a little march. A lot of times when I'm writing for outside bands and I'm working on commissions, I'll finish a big work, a big commission, and then the publisher says, well, we'd like a little easy grade 2 piece
Mhm.
for kids to play. And so the next day I'm working on a grade 2 piece after I finish a piece that would be considered grade 6. You know? But it's wonderful. It's a wonderful release not to be always working on a big piece, because
Yeah,
that's so much energy, so much time. And the creative process can really be draining at times.
yeah.
But I
Um,
had to continue in with the other composers.
oh, go for it,
During the
please.
Central Music Institute in Chicago, the Salvation Army, CMI, we call it.
Yep.
As a kid, I got to meet all those composers. I got to play under them, including Morley Calvert,
Oh, that's a name for me.
um, Dean Goffin,
Yeah.
just wonderful names that we grew up enjoying. In
Yeah.
fact, I was telling somebody last week, when Ray Bose was there,
Hmm.
I had just written my setting of Here at the Cross that I was talking about
Hmm.
earlier, and he said, "Well, let me look, let me look at it, and we'll run it down with the faculty band so you can hear it." And I took it to him, and I wondered, well, he's not going to get time to study the score. What's he going to do with this
Hmm.
piece, you know? And it was perfect. I mean, I could not have had it interpreted any better if I had been standing there myself. He understood the piece immediately. And I remember the last Saturday band festival, he had a band tie from his corps. It has a BB on it. I'm not sure what that is, what his corps was, Ray Bose. But anyway, he had that tie, and I
Yeah.
looked at it
I
and I
know he
said,
done Harlesden. I know he was at Harlesden Court because he wrote the
"Yes,
wonderful Harlesden
yeah."
March. But apart from
Anyway,
that, I don't know.
he had this tie on that was really neat, and I thought, uh, I'm going to ask him for it. So I said, no, I didn't ask him. I said, I really like your tie. That's a neat tie. He says, oh, you like it, do you? And he took it off, gave it to me. I still got it hanging in my closet. So
Okay, I'll have to admit to a very funny story here. When we done the Butlins holiday camp in the late 1980s, I think Len Ballantyne may have been the duty bandmaster at the time, and we played Harlesden, and this old man came in. It took me a long time to realise it was Ray Bose.
no, really.
I had never met the. I was a 10, 11-year-old banging away on the bass drum, just trying to keep the beat and just learning the basics. And this, I just wish I'd have known it was him. It was the only time I
Mhm.
ever knew I was in the same room as him.
Yeah.
But he came in and he went for it, and we played it in the Saturday night festival. And I thought, and sometime after, I said, "Who was that guy?" And they said, "You don't know?" Well, no. I said, "That was Ray Bose." What, the Ray Bose?
Oh yeah, he was wonderful. I just loved him. He was just very encouraging to all the young composers when he came to CMI.
Mm.
All the composers that came as a result of CMI were always influential in encouraging people to write. I remember a little piece I wrote, Songs of Praise, a little suite.
Yep.
Um, Eric Ball was the guest at camp, and he wanted to look at our manuscript. So I took that piece and he looked at it and he thumbed through it, and studied it as he was going. And he said, "Well, you need to send that over." He said that would work really well in our. I think it was I wrote it for Triumph series, but they somebody rescored it and they published it in a festival series. But it's not difficult enough for
Mm.
festival series. Anyway, he was very complimentary and said, "Why don't you send that over? Have it looked at." So he could have said, "Well, that's not bad," but and he did the same thing with some of the other guys my age who are trying to write and learn how to write.
I'm feeling my next question is a bit academic because you're still writing, but um, in a Salvation Army context, have you got anything in the pipeline for commissions or anything, or is this kind of you always have something in the pipeline?
Well, I have always something in the pipeline, more so for my outside music because I get a lot of requests.
Hmm.
Um, right now, I wrote a fanfare called Celebration Fanfare for a friend of mine for a wonderful community band in Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia, terrific band, and they were playing for a special event. So they asked for a fanfare, and I wrote it, and I based it on Austria.
Hmm.
Bum bum beam bum beam bum beam
Yeah.
bum beam. And recently, I was talking with Nick Simmons Smith,
Hmm.
territorial music director,
Yep.
who you know.
I know very
Uh,
well. Yeah, he just comes from
yeah,
down the
great
road.
guy, great guy. Yeah, from Atlanta, and I had
Ah, he's
sent
from
him
Chelmsford, you know.
who?
He comes from Chelmsford, you know.
Yes, I
Just,
know.
just
Yes.
down the road from me.
Okay. All right. Yeah, he's great. We've just really enjoyed him.
Yeah.
Um, and he said, "Why don't you rescore that for brass band, and we'll use it with the territorial band for commissioning coming up in
Okay.
June." Well, commissioning didn't happen,
No.
so I'm still in the process. I've kind of backed off on it right now. He said, "Just wait on it. We'll see what happens, and we're
Hmm.
going to have maybe we'll use it for the fall." So I'm working on rescoring it. Not in a hurry.
Yeah.
I've written a duet for a couple of friends for euphonium and trombone and cornet, or sorry,
Oh,
euphonium, trombone, and piano.
oh,
Um,
interesting.
that was supposed to be played down in Florida at the um, Tampa Corps,
Hmm.
which is a fine corps, by these two guys. These are guys I've known all my life. I would say school friends, but we didn't go to the same school. We're Salvationists. We're Salvationist friends.
Yes, absolutely.
One's trombone, one's euphonium, and I with piano. And I sent it to them, and they were going to premiere it the first time in Tampa. And of course, coronavirus came along, so I haven't heard that yet either. Several things I haven't heard
Corona
yet
seems to get in
recently. So
everywhere, doesn't it? Yes.
yeah, yeah. So anyway, I'm still working on the celebration fanfare, and I think Nick's planning on using it coming up in perhaps in the fall if we get open.
Yeah, there'll be something to look forward to.
Yeah,
Um, do you have a favourite Salvation Army song that really means a lot to you?
yeah. Actually, my favorite song, Salvation Army song, is "Here at the Cross."
Oh,
I just think it has so much depth to it. Um, and it's one of those songs that tells a wonderful story throughout the
mhm.
song. It's a narrative almost. How can I better serve thee, Lord? Um, Thou who hast done so much for me, you know.
Yeah.
And my emphasis is in the song, in the arrangement, comes up mostly on um, and something in weak. What is it? Hmm? Helpless indeed, I come with my need.
Yeah. Help us
Lord, for thy
I
service,
come with
fit
my
me, I
need.
plead.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Lord, for
really
thy
what I
service.
focused the piece on. Is that helpless indeed, because we are all helpless without the
Mhm.
Lord in our lives. So that helplessness can be taken away, and we can be fulfilled through having Christ in our lives. And that's probably actually when I was much younger, I used to do a lot of vocal soloing with my mom, played the piano for me,
Mhm.
and that was one of the songs that I featured a lot because it just meant so much to me.
Yeah. Do you have a favourite Bible quote, a Bible passage, scripture?
Yeah, actually, the Psalm 100, which I used in Psalm of Praise.
Hmm.
Actually, the title of the piece was originally Psalm of Praise, or no, it was originally Psalm 100. That's what I
Hmm.
titled the piece. And they in England they wrote to me and asked if I minded if they changed it to a Psalm of Praise. Didn't make any difference. You know, the
The
story's still the same.
message is still there.
Yeah, that's right. Titles don't count anyway. But that's my favorite psalm because it talks about joyousness, being joy in God's presence, you know, and that's what we need to do every day of our lives is try to be fulfilled and blessed and just live in His presence and be joyful about the
Yes.
fact that we can.
Well, it's very evident that the joyfulness of God is flowing through the music of Jim Curnow.
Oh well, thank you.
I've got to call this quits because I've got to have supper with the family. Jim, it has been a delight. We've never spoken before. You kind of accepted this zany idea that's been given to me freely and volunteered your time, for which I am eternally grateful, sir. To talk James Curnow music with the master himself, to hear the funny stories, to learn the stories and the text behind, and to know that God is really still working in you and continuing. I'm going to pray with you to conclude. You may join as you wish. Dear Lord, the subject of music that is so powerful in your church, Lord, in the Salvation Army, it is a gift that we've had from day one. And so many composers over the years have tried to live up to the standard. And we thank you for the music of James Curnow. We thank you that for so many years he has faithfully written for ensembles great and small. And no matter what challenges have been thrown in his direction, he has endeavored to meet them, knowing that you are ready to bless his work, and that when it doesn't work and when that gelling doesn't happen, he comes back to you, Lord, and you have the answer ready for him, and that he will continue to use this wonderful gift of composition and arranging and music that you have blessed him with for so many years, Lord. And we thank you for his family, his friends, his core folk, his musical ministry, Lord, that he's involved in, for the people that come into contact with him, for the teaching and the mentoring, and for those who meet him in the cafes and the restaurants and in the shopping malls, and those young kids that come up to him after concerts in awe of the great Salvation War, aware that faith is the victory, and they just want to spend time with this legend of the Salvation Army, Lord. But he is a man who just continually seeks to serve you, Lord, as best he can, with faith, work, and deed. And it has been very evident, Lord, and we thank you, Lord, that we have your scripture to fall back on. We can go back to the text at any time. So I ask your blessings upon him and his family, and particularly in this precarious time, that he will feel your love continuing to flow through him and surround him and his family at this difficult time, and that he will continue to serve so faithfully in that wonderful position that you have bestowed him with. Lord, I thank you for the Christian gentleman and salvationist that is James Curnow. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to
Hopefully sometime we'll get to meet face to face.